What's up, everybody? It's Dana Harris, Young Gurus Math Tutoring, and I'm back at you again with more math jewels. Here we go. So today we're going to be talking about the quadratic formula. Now, a lot of people have heard about the quadratic formula, but we're going to get into some specifics about the use of it and how we apply the quadratic formula. So first of all, we need to know what the quadratic formula is. So here we go. Negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, okay? And then we're going to put that all over 2a. Now, like most people, when you see formulas, you want to know what do all of those letters represent. So we need to figure out what all these variables represent. And we need to know that by understanding the standard form of a quadratic equation. So standard form of a quadratic equation looks like this. You have ax squared plus bx plus c, and we want to set it equal to 0, okay? So now, a is really just the coefficient of x squared. Now, what makes this quadratic is the fact that it has this exponent of 2. So we want to say standard form, okay? So we want to make sure that we understand that this equation right here is the standard form of a quadratic equation, all right? So now, what makes it quadratic, once again, is this exponent of 2. Since that's taken to the second power, that means the graph of this equation is going to be a parabola, which looks like this, or it's going to be a parabola that looks like this. Now, there are several different versions of parabolas, but that's the basic form of what a parabola looks like, okay? So all this tells me, the fact that it is a quadratic equation, it just tells me that the graph is going to look like this, okay? So a is nothing but the coefficient of x squared. B is the coefficient of x, and c is the constant in this particular quadratic equation. So how it relates to this over here, this b is the coefficient of x, so it's the same b over here. This b, same thing. This a is the coefficient of x squared. This c is the constant. And then this a right here is still the coefficient of x squared. So let's go ahead and get directly into an example of how we solve using the quadratic formula. All right, so let's say I have the equation. All right, let's say I have this equation right here. And let's say it tells me we have t squared minus 5t minus 14, and it equals 0. Okay, it must equal 0 in order to solve it because it's an equation. So now what we want to do is we want to establish what a, b, and c is. Okay, so in this case, a is going to be the coefficient of t squared. So there's no number in front of that, so a is considered to be 1. B is the coefficient of t. So it's negative 5. Remember, that negative sign goes with the number to its right. And then c in this case is negative 14. Okay? So now we know that a equals 1, b equals negative 5, and c equals negative 14. And we can simply just plug them into this formula right here. All right? So let's continue on. Let's erase what this looks like, because we're going to need this space. And now we're going to solve this particular equation using the quadratic formula. So let's go. Here we go. We can do it right here. So we can say negative b, so the opposite of b. So we have the opposite of negative 5, and then we're going to say plus or minus the square root of b squared. B is negative 5, so negative 5 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 14, okay? And that's all over 2 times 1, okay? So now that we have that, we're just going to continue on. We're going to say the opposite of negative 5 is 5 plus or minus the square root of 25 minus 4 times negative 14, okay? And that's all over 2. All right, now, when we get down here, we're going to go from there to here. We're simply going to say 5 plus or minus the square root of 25 plus, because if I have minus a negative, that's 56, and that's all over 2, which then finally simplifies to 5 plus or minus the square root of 50 plus 25 is 75, so 81 over 2. All right, square root of 81 is 9, so we have 5 plus or minus 9 over 2. All right, so now this is not our final answer, but we are at the end because we just have to break this down to 5 plus 9. So I'm going to go up here. So I have 5 plus 9 over 2, which equals 14 over 2, which is 7. That's our first solution. And then we have 5 minus 9 over 2, which is negative 4 over 2, which is negative 2. All right, so those are our two solutions. What do the solutions mean? The solutions to a quadratic equation are the values that make this equation true. So this is my values of x. In this case, when x is equal to 7, this is going to be equal to 0. Or when x is equal to negative 2, in this case t, I'm sorry, I said x, but I meant t in this case. When t is equal to negative 2, if I plug t in to this equation, I'm going to get 0. So your solution to a quadratic equation just tells you the value of the variable that is going to give you 0 when you plug it into that equation. All right, so that is the quadratic formula. Now, the quadratic formula, other uses, you'll be taught about factoring. You'll be taught about completing the square, and those are the two main ways that you're taught in school on how to solve a quadratic equation, but those can be very, very difficult. The quadratic formula works for every type of quadratic equation. Not every quadratic equation can be factored, and not every quadratic equation you can complete the square to solve. The quadratic formula works every time. Also, by the way, you can use the graphical method to solve a quadratic equation, but the quadratic formula works every single time for every type of quadratic equation. All you have to do is put it in standard form. Young Gurus Math Tutoring. I have the solution to your math problems. Do me a favor and go by my website, www.younggurusmathtutoring.com, and you can get your YGMT t-shirts. They're only $10, $15 if you need them shipped.